My world was Harmony Creek and the constant threat of Officer Miller. Then, tanks arrived on my street, and the general leading them pointed directly at me, declaring, "My son is under your protection." The air in Harmony Creek always hung thick and humid during July, but today it felt like it was electrically charged, ready to snap. I was just walking home from Mr. Henderson's convenience store, the plastic bag with the cheap chips and lukewarm soda sticking to my sweaty palm. I'm 16, almost 17, and trying my best to keep my head down. My name is Marcus, and in this town, being a black kid with a backpack just meant you were a target, especially when Officer Miller was on patrol. Miller. That name tastes like bile in my mouth. He wasn't just a cop. He was the cop. He looked like he was carved from granite, wearing that star like a declaration of war. He had this way of looking through you, not at you, like you were already guilty of something he hadn't even invented yet. I was 2 blocks from my grandmother's house, cutting across the faded lawn of the old abandoned church, the shortcut everyone took, when I heard the screech of tires that always preceded the inevitable. Miller's beat-up cruiser jumped the curb, spitting gravel onto the cracked pavement. He killed the engine, and the sudden silence was deafening, broken only by the ticking of the hot engine block. Miller didn't even bother getting out right away. He just leaned over, rolling down the passenger window, his face a mask of practiced contempt. "Hold it right there, boy." His voice was gravel and cheap whiskey, loud enough for the 3 houses down the street to hear. I stopped dead, my heart already doing that frantic drum solo against my ribs. I knew the drill. Hands visible. Don't look him in the eye. Don't breathe too loud. "Yes, officer," I managed, trying to keep my voice level, smooth, like the mediation training my high school tries to shove down our throats. "What's in the bag, Marcus?" he drawled, emphasizing the last syllable of my name like it was a foreign curse word. "Just snacks, officer. I was coming from the store." I held up the flimsy bag slightly, letting him see the bright orange of the chip bag. He unbuckled his seatbelt with agonizing slowness. The sound of the mechanism clicking was sharp, menacing. He pushed the door open, the hinges protesting loudly, and stepped out. He was huge, blocking the afternoon sun, casting my shadow long and thin behind me. Snacks. Right. Always snacks. "And where exactly are you headed in such a hurry, son?" He walked toward me, his boots crunching deliberately on the dry grass. He didn't stop until he was maybe 3 feet away, close enough that I could smell the stale coffee and gunpowder residue clinging to his uniform. "Home, sir. Grandma's house. She needs me to pick up some things." Miller squinted, his eyes darting from my face down to my sneakers, then back up. He didn't believe a word of it. "You look nervous." "Why you nervous, Marcus? You got something to hide? Something illegal? Drugs? Stolen property?" "No, officer. I'm nervous because you keep stopping me every time I walk down this street." I regretted the words the moment they left my mouth. It was the defiance, the quiet truth of it, that pushed him over the edge. His face darkened instantly. The practiced contempt was replaced by pure, unadulterated fury. "You want to lecture me on police procedure, boy? You think you're smart?" He suddenly lunged, not quite hitting me, but knocking my shoulder hard enough that I stumbled back a step. The plastic bag tore open, chips scattering across the dusty lawn like discarded confetti. The soda rolled away, threatening to burst. "Get your hands up where I can see them," he barked, reaching for his cuffs. "I didn't do anything," I protested, hands flying up instinctively, palms open. He grabbed my wrist, his grip instantly bruising. He twisted my arm behind my back with brutal efficiency, slamming my chest against his thick utility belt. The air rushed out of my lungs in a painful gasp. "Shut your mouth!" He wrenched my arm higher, forcing me onto my toes. "You young punks think you run this town now? You think you can talk back to authority?" He started fumbling with the cuffs, muttering threats about resisting arrest and obstruction. I could hear my own ragged breathing, the sound of my jeans scraping against the rough fabric of his uniform. This was it. Another night in the precinct, another pointless charge that would stick to me like tar. I braced for the steel bite of the cuffs, the humiliation, the call my grandmother would get. Just as the metal of the first cuff snapped open, A sound ripped through the quiet afternoon that wasn't a police siren, wasn't a car backfiring, and wasn't anything that belonged in Harmony Creek. It was a roar, a deep, guttural, mechanical thunder that vibrated through the ground, shaking the loose windows of the abandoned church. It was followed by a second, and then a third, distinct thumping sound, like giant, heavy footsteps closing in. Miller froze. His violent momentum stalled mid-cuffing. His head snapped up, scanning the street, his expression shifting instantly from aggressive dominance to utter cold confusion. The sound was getting louder, closer, and now, underneath the deep rumble, I could hear the distinct, high-pitched whine of heavy diesel engines straining under load, accompanied by the unmistakable crunch of treads chewing up asphalt. And then, turning the corner onto Elm Street, where the street sign was currently rattling violently in its mount, the first thing I saw wasn't Miller's cruiser. It was the olive-drab, impossibly massive silhouette of something that looked like it had rolled straight off a Wabu 2 newsreel, a full-sized main battle tank, followed by a military Humvee painted in the same drab camouflage, and then, incredibly, a third, slightly smaller armored personnel carrier, grinding its way slowly down the residential road, headlights blazing in the midday sun. Miller released my wrist so abruptly I nearly fell over. He wasn't looking at me anymore. He was staring, his mouth slightly agape, his face pale beneath his tan. "What in God's name?" he whispered, fumbling for his radio, his hand visibly shaking. From the lead tank, a hatch slammed open with a hydraulic hiss. A figure rose up, framed against the sun. He was wearing a crisp, starched military uniform, not the local police khaki, but the heavy-duty, desert tan fatigues of a high-ranking officer. He wore aviator sunglasses, even in the shade of the giant treads, and he looked down at the scene, the scattered chips, the terrified teenager, the petrified local cop, with an expression that promised immediate, catastrophic consequences. The man scanned the street, his gaze locking onto Miller's cruiser, and then, impossibly, moving directly past Miller to fix on me. "Marcus!" the figure bellowed, his voice amplified by some unseen speaker system, vibrating through the humid air. "Get away from that man! Come here, son! Now!" Miller slowly turned his head toward me, his eyes wide with a terror I had never seen on his face before. He looked from the gigantic, idling war machine to the imposing general standing atop it, and back to me, the kid he was just about to throw in jail. And then the general pointed directly at Officer Miller, his finger rigid as a rifle barrel. "You!" he roared. "Officer Miller, you are under immediate detainment for abuse of power and violation of civil rights. My son is under your protection, and you assaulted him." My blood ran cold. My son? The world seemed to tilt on its axis. My son? The general's voice, powerful and utterly certain, echoed off the silent houses. The implication hit me with the force of a physical blow. This heavily armed military contingent wasn't here for some generalized training exercise. They were here for me, Key. Officer Miller visibly deflated. The aggressive posture melted away, replaced by a panicked, sickly realization dawning across his face. He looked like a dog that had just realized the master of the house had caught him chewing the furniture. His hand dropped from his radio. Forgotten. "Sir? General Stone? I don't understand. This is Marcus Johnson. He's just a civilian." Miller stammered, trying to regain some semblance of authority, but his voice cracked on the word civilian. General Stone, because that's who he had to be, judging by the rank insignia that caught the sunlight, didn't even bother addressing Miller directly. He kept his gaze locked on me, his expression softening fractionally, though his stance remained rigid. "Marcus," he commanded, his voice losing the booming quality but gaining an intense focus. "I said, come here. Now." I didn't hesitate this time. The fear of Miller was instantly eclipsed by the overwhelming, bizarre spectacle before me. I scrambled away from the defeated cop, my legs pumping, tripping over the scattered potato chips, heading toward the mountain of steel that was the lead tank. Two soldiers, looking impossibly clean and sharp in their desert gear, jumped down from the sides of the APC, moving with practiced, silent coordination. They didn't approach me with weapons drawn, but their presence was enough to form an impenetrable cordon. As I reached the shadow of the tank, General Stone lowered himself down from the hatch with surprising agility, landing softly on the pavement. He was taller up close, radiating an almost tangible aura of command. He swept his hand toward Miller, who was now practically vibrating with suppressed panic. "Sergeant Reynolds," the general barked at one of the flanking soldiers. "Take him, cuff him, read him his rights, though I doubt he needs to hear them twice. He's going downtown, not to the local jail. I'll be calling the state commissioner immediately about the equipment requisition." Reynolds moved, swift and professional. Miller didn't resist. He simply stood there, his face ashen, defeated before the first handcuff even clicked. General Stone turned fully to me, his attention singular. He took my empty, torn chip bag from my numb fingers and dropped it dismissively on the ground. "Are you hurt, Marcus?" he asked, his tone shifting entirely. The general voice replaced by something infinitely gentler, something that felt startlingly familiar, despite the fact that I had never seen this man before in my life. "No, sir," I managed, my voice a squeak. I think my wrist is just bruised." He gently took my wrist, turning it over. He inspected the red indentations left by Miller's vice-like grip. He didn't press, just observed, his brow furrowing in quiet outrage. "That piece of trash," he muttered, shaking his head. I knew he was bad news. Harmony Creek PD has been on my radar for months. Internal Affairs has been building a case, but they couldn't get a clean tail on him until I decided to bring my own surveillance unit. "Surveillance unit?" I echoed weakly, looking at the tanks. "Yes, Marcus, let's go. We need to get you somewhere safe and get you cleaned up." And then he looked back at the defeated Miller being led toward the Humvee. "We're going to have a long conversation." He placed a firm, reassuring hand on my shoulder and guided me toward the ramp of the APC. The other soldier held the hatch open. Climbing into the back of that vehicle felt like stepping onto another planet. All cold metal, reinforced glass, and complex wiring. "General," I started as I climbed in, suddenly needing an explanation, needing to know why he called me his son. "I don't understand. Who are you? And why? Why did you say I was your son?" General Stone paused at the lip of the hatch. He looked back down Elm Street, where Mrs. Gable was now peering nervously from behind her lace curtains, and then fixed his penetrating gaze on me, one last time. "My name is Richard Stone, Marcus," he said, his voice dropping low, almost conspiratorial. "And the reason I called you my son is because you are. You are my son, and I apologize, truly, for not being here sooner to stop the garbage like Miller from ever bothering you." My world dissolved. My mind raced, clutching at every fleeting image of my absent father, the quiet man who left when I was 4, promising to come back when his work was done, sending sporadic, brief letters from overseas military posts. My father," I whispered, the name tasting alien on my tongue. General Stone gave a slow, tired nod. "I'm sorry about the delayed introduction, Marcus. But the fact is, my deployment orders came through unexpectedly early this morning. I arranged this little welcome home parade, complete with heavy ordnance, specifically to ensure there would be no more harassment while I settled my affairs. Unfortunately," he glanced pointedly back at the shell-shocked Miller being shoved into the back of the Humvee, "I missed your little run-in by mere minutes." Before I could process the impossible reality, that the powerful military man who could deploy tanks was the father I thought had forgotten me, the engine of the APC roared to life. The ground shook again. "Now," General Stone said, climbing in beside me, the hatch slamming shut and plunging us into a muted, operational gloom lit only by the instrument panels. "We have about a 15-minute drive back to the base. I need you to look at these files. The longer I'm stateside, the harder it is to keep a low profile. I need you to tell me everything you know about your mother's recent activities, specifically the encrypted package she mailed last Tuesday. Because, Marcus, whether you realize it or not, we just caused a massive international incident by rolling tanks through a suburban street, and I need to know if it was worth it." The air inside the APC was thick with the smell of diesel, ozone, and adrenaline. The jolting ride made it hard to focus, but my mind was racing at a terrifying velocity, trying to reconcile the gentle, apologetic man who was my father with the heavily armored, commanding figure who commanded mechanized death machines. Encrypted package? My mother, I stammered, leaning closer to him as the APC rumbled over the cracked pavement, clearly leaving the residential streets for something wider. Sir, General, I don't know anything about an encrypted package. She just works at the community college library. General Stone? No, Dad. Sighed. A sound heavy with years of stress that transcended military rank. He reached for a heavy-duty briefcase near his feet, using a complex retinal scan before it even hissed open. Inside weren't maps or troop deployments, but stacks of pristine white envelopes and one small silver device that looked far too delicate for this environment. Your mother, Marcus, is a lot more than a librarian, he said, his voice low, almost mournful. He slid one of the white envelopes across the metal bench toward me. The return address was a post office box in Geneva. She's been working with the clandestine branch of the State Department on asset extraction from hostile regimes for nearly a decade. I've been in the field, running security ops. We've been using my long deployments as cover for her own missions. It's how we kept you safe, or so we thought. He tapped the silver device. This is a secure receiver. About an hour ago, your mother accessed the network remotely, flagged a Level 7 exfiltration priority, and sent this device, containing the critical data she uncovered, to an untraceable drop point outside our usual communication sphere. She used the only person she thought would be absolutely untouchable by the people she's hunting. And who is that? I asked, my fingers tracing the edge of the Geneva envelope. The world had become a spy thriller, and I was the unwilling protagonist. Me, Dad admitted grimly. Which means whoever is after her, whoever she stole this data from, they know I'm back. And they knew exactly where to strike first, by targeting the connection between us. He leaned back against the reinforced wall, the tracks outside grinding a steady, monotonous rhythm. I got the alert right as I was landing at the regional airfield. My immediate priority was establishing contact with your mother. But my secondary, and frankly more urgent priority, was making sure Officer Miller didn't have time to make you a liability before I could secure you. Miller knew who you were, I asked, feeling a fresh wave of nausea. Miller, Dad spat the name out like poison, is deep cover for the very people your mother exposed. He's not just a racist small-town bully, Marcus. He's an operative, a cleanup man. He was waiting for me to step off the plane, waiting to use local jurisdiction to seize or eliminate you as leverage the second I tried to make contact with your mom. He tapped the silver receiver again. This data is explosive. It names everyone, the entire network funding global destabilization efforts through illicit markets. If they get this, not only do they walk free, but your mother is dead, and probably you too, once they realize you're my kid. The gravity of the situation was crushing. My absent father wasn't just a soldier. He was fighting a shadow war that had just dragged my unassuming mother and me into the center of the blast radius. So what happens now? I whispered, clutching the strange receiver. Where is she? Is she safe? General Stone looked away, his jaw tight. He stared at the forward viewport, where the view was now nothing but the gray, windowless walls of an underground military installation they were clearly driving into. The APC began to slow, the grinding noise dropping in pitch as they moved into a docking bay. That's the problem, Marcus, Dad said, his voice losing all its authority, replaced by raw despair. The moment she sent this package, her secure line went dark. No pings, no transmissions, nothing. I've been trying to raise her command center since I landed. They're either wiped clean, or they've been compromised. He closed the briefcase with a sharp snap. I told you I got you out of Miller's grasp. I got you away from immediate arrest. But the hard truth is this. I don't know where your mother is, and I don't know if the people who took her are already inside this base waiting for us. The APC stopped completely. The heavy hydraulic ramp began to lower with a protesting groan, revealing not the sterile, brightly lit halls of a secure military base, but a section of the underground garage bathed in sickly, flickering emergency lights. Standing directly in the path of the ramp, silhouetted against the weak light, were not welcoming medics or supportive troops, but four figures in dark, unmarked tactical gear. none of them wearing any recognizable military insignia. They held suppressed rifles aimed squarely at the APC's open hatch. General Stone shoved me behind him, pulling a sidearm from his holster with impossible speed. "Reynolds, secure the asset! Defend! We have an internal breach!" he roared, but the soldiers flanking the APC were already moving, exchanging silent, deadly fire with the intruders. The silver receiver slipped from my sweaty hand, clattering onto the metal floor of the APC just as a deafening crack echoed through the bay. The sound of a rifle firing too close, too loud, and General Stone suddenly recoiled, clutching his shoulder, a dark stain blooming rapidly across the pristine tan of his uniform. The sound of the gunshot was followed by a sickening thud as my father crumpled against the interior wall of the APC. The world dissolved into chaos. Shouts, the ringing echo of gunfire, and the overwhelming smell of cordite replacing the stale diesel. "Dad!" I screamed, lunging toward him, momentarily forgetting the armed figures closing in on the ramp. Sergeant Reynolds, who had been moving to engage the attackers, pivoted instantly, his training kicking in like a defibrillator. He grabbed my arm, hauling me back just as a burst of suppressed fire chewed up the metal where my head had been seconds before. "Stay down, Marcus! Get behind the seat!" Reynolds yelled, dropping into a low crouch and returning fire with controlled bursts toward the shadowy figures. I scrambled backward, my heart hammering against my ribs, my eyes fixed on my father. General Stone, my father, was conscious, but barely. Blood was pouring steadily from the wound in his shoulder. He was gripping his sidearm with his good hand, firing slow, accurate shots toward the perimeter of the garage entrance. "The data, Marcos!" he gasped, his breath ragged. "Get the data! That silver piece, it's everything!" I looked down. The silver receiver lay just inches from my boot. The fight was raging all around us. The roar of the APC engines, the frantic crackle of military comms overlaid with the deadly silence of the intruders' suppressed weapons. This wasn't a perimeter breach. This was an execution attempt disguised as a raid. They had been waiting inside. I snatched up the receiver. It felt warm now, almost vibrating faintly in my palm. "Where do I take it?" I yelled over the din. "The command bunker. Access code Delta 90. Tell General Thorne it's the Stone contingency." He coughed, a wet, harsh sound, and then locked eyes with me, his gaze fierce despite the pain. "Go! Thorne is my contingency plan. He'll protect you and the data. Now, Marcus, run!" Reynolds provided covering fire, pulling the charging handle on his rifle with vicious efficiency, driving the intruders back a few steps. "Marcus, go! I'll keep them pinned." I didn't need telling twice. Using the brief respite Reynolds bought me, I dove out of the APC hatch, landing hard on the concrete floor of the bay. The tactical figures momentarily shifted their focus to the threat posed by Reynolds and the other soldiers, giving me a split second of unimpeded access to the maze of corridors leading away from the vehicle bay. I sprinted. The sterile white hallways of what I now knew was a top-secret military installation blurred past me. I clutched the receiver like a lifeline. Delta 90. I repeated the code, forcing myself to remember the impossible instructions. I found the armored door marked Restricted Access Level 5. I slammed my palm against the biometric scanner, praying my father's emergency authentication would still be active on the network. The light turned green. The heavy door hissed open. Inside, the room was quiet, filled with banks of humming servers and a single, older man sitting calmly at a massive console, sipping coffee from a ceramic mug, a stark contrast to the pandemonium outside. He looked up, unsurprised, as I burst in, panting, bloodied, and clutching the silver device. "Marcus Stone," the man said, setting his mug down with precision. "I've been expecting you. General Thorne. Your father gave me the heads-up 5 minutes before his convoy even landed." "My father," I choked out, stumbling toward the console. "He's shot. Miller, the cop. He was working for them. They hit us inside the base." Thorne's face hardened. "I know. The breach alarm just went critical. They neutralized the APC team quickly, but Reynolds is holding the bay doors. He's buying you time." He gestured to a slot on the console, clearly designed for the silver device. "Give it to me." I slid the receiver into the slot. It clicked home, and the entire room lit up with rapid data streams scrolling across every monitor. "It's uploading now," Thorne confirmed, watching the progress bar inch upward. The data is safe, Marcus. Your mother's intel is now in the hands of the only people who can act on it without being compromised. He looked at me, his expression serious but resolved. Your father knew this might happen. He arranged for extraction before he even brought you here. You are officially under protective custody under the highest level of military non-disclosure. The upload bar hit 100%. A soft chime echoed through the bunker. It's done, Thorne breathed out, leaning back. The network is collapsing worldwide as we speak. Those thugs outside? They've just lost their entire operation. Just then, the internal comms system crackled to life. Thorne instantly switching to a secure channel. Thorne here. Status report on Bay 2. A tense voice replied, Bay 2 secure, General. Intruders neutralized. Reynolds took a ricochet to the helmet, but he's alive. General Stone is en route to Trauma Bay 1. Relief washed over me so powerfully it almost brought me to my knees. My father was alive. The data was safe. The nightmare was finally over. Thorne turned back to me, a small, weary smile touching his lips. You did good, Marcus. You were brave. You saved the operation. What about Miller? I asked, the memory of the initial confrontation sharp and ugly. Miller is currently being processed by an entirely different branch of the military intelligence, Thorne replied coldly. He won't see daylight in this jurisdiction again. Justice, in its own way, has been served. He stood up, placing a hand on my shoulder, a gesture strikingly similar to my father's. Now we clean up. You have a family that needs reuniting, and a world that needs rebuilding, now that this cancer has been excised. He paused, his eyes twinkling slightly. And Marcus, you might want to get used to this. We have a lot to catch up on. You're going to be spending a lot more time around the military from now on. I looked at the screen displaying my mother's encrypted message, now fully decrypted, ready to dismantle a global criminal network. I thought of the chips scattered on the lawn, the bullying cop, and the sudden terrifying arrival of my father with his tank escort. The quiet life in Harmony Creek was irrevocably gone, replaced by a bewildering, dangerous legacy I was only just beginning to understand. I nodded, finally accepting the truth. I was a soldier's son, and this strange, chaotic, high-stakes world was now my inheritance.